At times, there are people that I love dearly that chastise me. Avis Watson is one of them. He has, through the years, whenever I look to John 8 and verse 32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Generally, he will come to me afterwards and say, you know, you really need to look at verse 31 also. And he's exactly right. And verse 31, you look at that in John 8 and verse 31, Jesus said, if you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed. And you think about it, that's just a bunch of words, so really doesn't mean or add a lot to it anyway. You shall know the truth shall make you free. That's the important thing, right? Well, actually, if you look at that collection of words, you think about what that says. If you just break it down, he begins with the word if. If you continue in my word. That's a word of condition. If. Here is a choice that's before you. Every one of us has to make a choice. But it's a word of caution also. Because if I don't make that choice, something might happen. So there's decision time in the very first word. And then ye. That's a word of personality. You know that I love to personalize the Scriptures. I do it in my reading. I try and put my name in there. I read and I think, okay, what does that mean to me? What does it mean about my life? Well, whenever he says, if ye. Now, I realize he was talking to the Jews, but the application is me too. God's not a respecter of persons, so he puts some obligation upon me personally. There's a word of personal responsibility for every single one of us whenever you see that word ye. And then the word continue, steadfastness. And you know, all of the sports commercials, just do it. You know, you've got to keep on. No pain, no gain. Well, those are good little sayings because really they have a biblical basis. Continue is a word of labor. You got to put forth the effort. And it's steadfastness. Can't stop. Got to continue on. Got to keep on pressing on, as Paul would say in the Philippian letter. And then in my word. That's a kind of exclusiveness, isn't it? The world likes to have this idea that it doesn't matter whatever standard, whatever it is that you want to choose. But Jesus says, in my word. That's a word of location. It's exclusiveness. There's only one word. Jesus himself is called the Word in John 1, but he gave the Word. The Spirit came and he guided those individuals unto all truth. And it's that Word which is the exclusive standard that I must make the decision to be steadfast to continue in. It's my personal responsibility, condition that I must meet. And then he says, then are ye. And that's a word of ability. You know, here it is, I've got to make a choice. And so many times, have we ever been guilty of saying, I know I ought to, but I can't. Well, God had already said we could continue in it, but he says, then are ye. In other words, I can let that word living through me accomplish what it's meant to be. There's a conclusion there, a word of ability. And then he says, ye are my disciples. And that's kind of a sobering thought too, the idea of continuing. But here it tells that our life of continuing is just a beginning of sorts. The word disciple means a pupil, a learner, a student. And that's what I always am. I always appreciate Paul's words in 2 Timothy 4 when he's writing to Timothy. He's about to die. And he says, bring my cloak, but bring the parchments. See, he wasn't through. We're all continuing on as pupils. We're just beginning, in a sense, every day. You read, you study, you look, you live, you apply. What the pupil does. The word of beginning, not an end. And then he says, that last word, you're my disciples indeed. That is a word of certainty. I mean, you know, the world is filled with people that claim to be followers of Jesus. But this verse lays down a condition, a caution. It gives the responsibility. It shows that we've got to continue. It shows the location, the exclusiveness. It shows the word of ability. It shows that you're beginning in that. But it says, whenever you do this, you are my disciples indeed. For sure. Absolutely. I mean, that word is so filled with power as to there is a conclusion. Like Paul said in 2 Timothy, as he began that letter in chapter 1 and verse 12, he says, I know whom I believed, and I'm persuaded he's able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. He was a disciple indeed, wasn't he? He knew the Lord would never leave him nor forsake him. And he knew what his end would be. A disciple indeed. And then, after just those words, he says, here is what you need to focus on a little bit. Goes back to that kind of exclusive idea, that narrow way. You shall know the truth. The truth shall make you free. You start over, it seems, if, caution. There's a lot of things out there besides truth. But I'm going to stay with the truth because that is what makes me free. So, I read that verse, and, I appreciate all people who are willing to come to me and tell me, you need to think about this, look at this. But like I said, this is just kind of a thing that Avis has had with me. He's trying to beat it into my head, and maybe he'll get it there one of these days. But verse 31 ought to be included right along with verse 32. And you look at that and you find that that word is the center of it, that exclusive aspect in verse 31 and the means of having that freedom in verse 32. And it's no wonder, because in John 12 and verse 48, he said, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words has one that judgeth him. The word that I've spoken, same will judge him in that day. So tonight we need to look and see, where am I? We can know the truth, but really verse 31 says, what are you going to do with it? I pray that we will be disciples indeed, for sure. The way to do that, of course, Jesus' teaching, we can't reject what he said. And if we want to be saved, Mark 16 and 16, he that believeth and is baptized. He is the way, the truth, the life, John 14 and verse 6, and he set the pattern, the way. So tonight, are we his disciples indeed? Can be, if we make that right decision.